life is not hard because you are broken. It is hard because you are confused. And confusion, left unchecked, turns pressure into panic and challenges into suffering. You wake up every day feeling like something is chasing you. Deadlines, expectations, problems you never asked for, situations you don't feel ready to handle. And slowly, quietly, you begin to believe the lie that life is against you, that you are unlucky, that others have it easier, that something must be wrong with you. But listen closely. Nothing is wrong with you. What's missing is clarity. No one ever taught you how to think when everything feels heavy. No one showed you how to slow your mind when emotions surge, how to separate signal from noise, how to turn problems into instructions instead of threats. So when pressure arrives, you react, you rush, you avoid, you hope the storm passes on its own. And every time you do, the problem grows stronger while your confidence shrinks. This is how people stay stuck for years, not because the problems are impossible, but because the mind stays disorganized. Chaos outside becomes chaos inside. And when the mind is chaotic, every decision feels overwhelming. Every obstacle feels personal. Every setback feels like proof that you're not enough. Here is the truth most people never hear. Problems are not enemies. They are information. Every challenge you face is carrying a message, a signal pointing toward a skill you haven't built yet, a boundary you haven't enforced, a belief you haven't questioned, or a habit you've outgrown. Problems exist to expose gaps. Confusion exists when you don't know how to read the signal. Strong people are not problem-free, they are confusion-free. They don't panic when things break. They don't collapse when plans fail. They pause. They analyze. They extract meaning. While others drown in emotion, they organize their thinking. And that single difference changes everything. This audiobook is not here to hype you up. Motivation fades. Emotion burns fast and leaves nothing behind. What lasts is structure. What lasts is a clear framework that turns stress into strategy and pressure into progress. You are here to learn how to think, not how to escape. Clarity is control. Control is strength. And strength is built, not given. As you move forward, you will stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" You will stop reacting and start responding. You will stop seeing problems as signs of weakness and start recognizing them as invitations to grow. This is the moment everything begins to shift, not because life gets easier, but because you get clearer. And clarity is the foundation of every solution you will ever create. Confusion drains energy faster than hard work ever could. It scatters your focus, weakens your discipline, and convinces you that rest is the answer, when what you really need is direction. Without clarity, effort feels pointless. With clarity, even pain makes sense. This is the difference between burning out and breaking through. You are standing at the starting line of a different way of living, a way where you don't fear problems, you decode them. Where you don't numb discomfort, you learn from it. Where pressure sharpens you instead of crushing you. That shift begins now, with how you think. In the next moments, you will lay the foundation. You will rebuild your mindset so every problem becomes usable, every obstacle becomes instructive, and every challenge becomes fuel. Before strategy, before action, before execution, there is perception. And perception determines everything. Stay here. Stay present. The noise will fade as understanding grows. You are not here to be comforted. You are here to be strengthened. The confusion that once controlled you is about to be replaced by clarity, and clarity will change how you move, how you decide, and how you win. This is the first step, a quiet one, but it carries power, and from this foundation, everything else will rise. Take it seriously. Your future depends on what you learn next. Mindset is where the war is decided, and this is where you begin, right now. Pay attention. This matters. Deeply, always. Chapter 1. Shifting Your Mindset, the Foundation of All Solutions. You have been trained to see problems as punishment, as if every obstacle is life pointing a finger at you, accusing you of failure. So when something goes wrong, your first instinct is emotional. You get frustrated, you get defensive, you ask why this keeps happening to you. And in that moment, before you even realize it, you give the problem control. This is where most people lose, not because they are incapable, but because they misinterpret reality. They assume pain means danger. They assume difficulty means stop. They assume resistance means they are on the wrong path. And that assumption poisons their thinking before the work even begins. Strong thinkers see something different. They understand a truth that changes everything. Problems are not moral judgments. They are data, neutral, precise, informative. Every problem is carrying instructions about what needs to be adjusted, upgraded, or removed. The moment you treat it like an attack, you miss the message. The moment you treat it like information, you gain leverage. Your mindset is not about being positive. It is about being accurate. Most people think mindset means optimism, smiling through stress, pretending everything will work out. That is weakness disguised as hope. Real mindset is disciplined interpretation. It is the ability to choose meaning instead of letting emotion assign it for you. When something breaks, the weak mind says, "This is unfair." The trained mind says, "This is feedback." When plans collapse, the reactive mind panics. The disciplined mind asks better questions. This is the shift. From resistance to curiosity, from emotion to analysis, from chaos to structure. Look around and you will see the difference everywhere. Some people face pressure and spiral. They complain. They externalize blame. They stay loud but stagnant. Others face pressure and sharpen. They get quieter. They focus. They extract lessons and move forward stronger than before. Same world, same difficulty, completely different results. The difference is not intelligence. It is interpretation. Every time you ask, "Why is this happening to me?" you frame yourself as powerless. You position life as the attacker and yourself as the victim. But the moment you ask, "What is this teaching me?" something changes. You step into the role of student instead of target. You regain control. Curiosity replaces fear, and fear can never survive curiosity. This is not about suppressing emotion. Emotion is natural, but emotion is a signal, not a commander. When you let feelings lead, your decisions become short-term and self-protective. When you let thinking lead, your actions become strategic and constructive. Mindset is the gatekeeper of progress. If you believe problems mean you are failing, you will avoid them. If you believe problems mean you are learning, you will lean in. One mindset shrinks your world. The other expands it. Think about how many times you stopped early. How many times you quit mentally before you quit physically. Not because you were done, but because the discomfort convinced you something was wrong. That was not weakness. That was untrained interpretation. You were never taught to sit with difficulty and analyze it. You were taught to escape it, distract yourself, numb it, complain about it. But growth demands the opposite. Growth demands stillness under pressure. The ability to look directly at the problem without flinching and say, "Tell me what you're here to show me." This is where power begins. When you stop labeling problems as bad, you stop wasting energy fighting reality. That energy becomes available for thinking, for planning, for execution. And suddenly, what once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. Not because it shrank, but because your mind expanded. High performers do not have fewer problems. They have higher quality ones, bigger responsibilities, greater stakes, and they are calm inside them because they have trained their mindset to read pressure correctly. To them, pressure is not a threat. It is confirmation that they are operating at a higher level. You must adopt that frame. Your life will never become problem-free. That is a fantasy, but your life can become confusion-free. And that is what changes everything. Confusion makes small problems feel unbearable. Clarity makes heavy problems feel solvable. This chapter is not about motivation. It is about calibration, adjusting how you interpret events so they stop draining you and start developing you. Once you master this, problems lose their emotional charge. They become tasks, signals, puzzles to solve. And when problems become puzzles, you stop fearing them. This is the foundation. Before tactics, before strategies, before action, how you see determines how you move. A distorted mindset creates wasted effort. A disciplined mindset creates momentum. As you move forward, you are training yourself to pause instead of panic, to observe instead of react, to extract meaning instead of absorbing damage. That shift alone will separate you from most people you know. You are becoming someone who uses adversity instead of being used by it. Someone who stays composed when others collapse. Someone who turns resistance into refinement. And this is only the beginning. You are learning to build a pause between stimulus and response. In that pause, you reclaim choice. Choice is where freedom lives. Without it, you are always reacting, always late, always chasing stability instead of creating it. With it, you begin to shape outcomes deliberately, calmly, and consistently. This mindset does not arrive overnight. It is trained through repetition. Each time you choose interpretation over impulse, you reinforce the habit. Each time you slow down instead of speeding up, you gain ground. Over time, the same situations that once overwhelmed you will feel familiar, even predictable. That is when confidence becomes real, not loud, not performative, quiet and steady, built on evidence, built on knowing that no matter what appears, you know how to think your way through it. That certainty becomes your anchor as the journey deepens. You will not escape discomfort on this path. You will outgrow it. What once felt like pressure will feel like training. What once felt confusing will feel structured. This is how competence is born. And competence, repeated daily, becomes self-respect. It changes how you carry yourself, how you speak, and how you decide under stress, because your mind is no longer guessing. It is grounded, trained, and ready for what comes next. Always stay sharp. Once your mindset is calibrated, the fog begins to lift. What once felt overwhelming starts to reveal structure. Patterns emerge, causes become visible. The problem stops feeling personal and starts feeling solvable. That is where real discovery starts, and that is where you are headed next. Chapter 2. from reaction to control, ending emotional chaos. The moment something goes wrong, your body reacts before your mind has a chance to speak. Your chest tightens, your thoughts race, your emotions surge forward like a riot with no leader. And before you realize what's happening, you've already made a decision you'll later have to fix. This is how emotional chaos quietly runs most lives. Reaction feels natural. Control feels trained. Most people confuse emotional intensity with truth. If it feels urgent, they act. If it feels painful, they escape. If it feels unfair, they lash out. But feelings are fast, not wise. They are alarms, not instructions. When you let them take the wheel, you don't solve problems, you multiply them. Think about how many mistakes were not caused by lack of intelligence, but lack of pause. Words said too quickly, choices made too early, quitting in moments that required patience. Reaction feels relieving in the moment, but expensive in the long run. It trades short-term comfort for long-term chaos. Control begins with one decision. You slow down. Calm is not weakness. Calm is leverage. In a world addicted to urgency, the person who can pause owns the room. While others rush, you observe. While others panic, you organize. While others react emotionally, you collect information. That difference compounds. Emotional control is not suppression. You are not becoming cold or detached. You are becoming precise. You feel everything, but you don't obey everything. You recognize emotion without surrendering authority to it. That is mastery. The untrained mind lives at the mercy of its moods. One bad moment becomes a bad day. One bad day becomes a bad week. And soon life feels heavier than it actually is. Not because the problems grew, but because reaction never stopped. Control interrupts that cycle. When pressure hits, you don't move immediately. You breathe. You create space. That space is where power lives. Between stimulus and response, you reclaim choice. Without that space, you are predictable. With it, you are dangerous in the best way. Strong people are not calm by accident. They practice it. They fail at it. They return to it again and again. Calm becomes familiar. Reaction becomes optional. This is not talent. It is training. Notice how emotional reactions shrink your perspective. Everything feels personal. Everything feels final. Everything feels urgent. Control expands perspective. You see options. You see timing. You see consequences before they arrive. That clarity is not emotional. It is earned. You are not here to eliminate emotion. You are here to outgrow being ruled by it. Most stress is not caused by what happens. It is caused by how quickly you respond. Speed without clarity creates damage. Slowness with intention creates precision. The world tells you to move fast. Mastery teaches you when to wait. Every time you pause instead of react, you strengthen a muscle, the self-control muscle. At first it feels uncomfortable. Your body wants release. Your mind wants resolution. But if you stay still long enough, the storm passes. And when it does, you're left standing with clarity instead of regret. This is how emotional chaos ends. Not through force, but through awareness. You begin to notice the pattern. Emotion rises, urge appears, pause is created, choice is made. Repeat. Over time, this becomes automatic. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once hijacked you becomes background noise. Control is quiet. It does not announce itself. It simply shows up in your decisions, in your tone, in your timing. People feel it around you. Situations stabilize in your presence. Not because you dominate, but because you don't panic. That is real authority. When you stop reacting, you stop leaking energy. You stop replaying conversations. You stop fighting imaginary battles. Your mind becomes available for higher level thinking. Solutions require that space. You cannot solve problems from inside emotional turbulence. This chapter is about reclaiming your nervous system, teaching it that urgency is not danger, that discomfort is not emergency, that stillness is safe. Once your body learns this, your mind follows. You are becoming an observer of your inner world. Thoughts arise, feelings surge. You watch them without obeying them. That distance creates clarity. Clarity creates control. Control creates progress. Most people never learn this. They live their entire lives reacting, always tired, always stressed, always feeling behind. You are choosing something different. You are choosing to build composure under pressure. That composure will change how you approach every problem. Instead of chaos, there will be order. Instead of panic, there will be process. Instead of emotion, there will be evaluation. This is the shift from being inside the storm to studying it. As control becomes familiar, your confidence grows quietly. You trust yourself not because life is easy, but because you know how you respond when it isn't. That trust becomes your anchor. And from that anchor, you can finally begin to see problems clearly. Reaction keeps you trapped inside the problem. Control places you above it. From here, the next step becomes possible. Once emotion no longer blinds you, you can start identifying what is actually happening. Not what it feels like, not what you fear, but what is real. That is where clarity sharpens. That is where discovery begins. Chapter 3. The Detective Mindset. Learning to see clearly. The moment emotional control becomes familiar, something powerful happens. You can finally see, not react, not assume. See. This is the moment you stop drowning inside the problem and step outside it. Most people never make this shift. They stay pressed against the glass, faces distorted by stress, breath shallow, thoughts loud. From that position, everything feels bigger, heavier, more personal than it actually is. The detective mindset begins with distance. Distance does not mean avoidance. It means perspective. It means refusing to let proximity blur judgment. You step back, slow the moment down, and give your mind room to work. This is where emotional fog lifts. When you are too close, you mistake feelings for facts. You assume intentions. You guess causes. You react to symptoms instead of studying structure. Distance clears the air. Think of a detective at a crime scene. They don't rush to conclusions. They don't argue with the evidence. They observe. They document. They look for inconsistencies and patterns others miss. That same discipline is now yours. Your life is no different. Every recurring problem leaves clues. Every breakdown has a sequence. Every moment of friction has a history. But you can only see that when you stop taking everything personally. Personalization is the enemy of clarity. When you label everything as an attack, your mind closes. Defenses rise. Curiosity dies. The detective mindset does the opposite. It asks what happened, how it happened, and why. This chapter is not about speed. It is about slowing down enough to see what speed hides. Stillness is not passive. Stillness is active observation. It is a deliberate pause that allows intelligence to surface. Most people are uncomfortable with stillness because it removes distraction. Without noise, you notice details. You see contradictions. You spot patterns you were avoiding. And once seen, they cannot be unseen. As a detective, you learn to separate assumption from evidence. Assumptions are fast and comforting. Evidence is slower and often inconvenient. But evidence is honest, and honesty is where solutions begin. You stop saying, "This always happens to me," and start asking, "When did this start, and what changed before it did?" That shift alone turns frustration into investigation. You are no longer trapped, you are engaged. Clarity requires neutrality, not emotional neutrality, but intellectual fairness. You look at the facts even when they challenge your identity. You resist the urge to defend yourself and choose instead to understand yourself. This is where growth accelerates. When ego steps aside, information flows freely. You can finally admit patterns that repeat because of your habits, your timing, your boundaries. That honesty is uncomfortable, but it is liberating. The detective mindset is patient. It does not demand instant answers. It respects complexity. Some problems reveal themselves slowly. When you rush, you force conclusions. When you wait, reality speaks. Stillness sharpens perception. You begin noticing timing, environment, triggers, and reactions. You see how small decisions stack into large outcomes. Nothing feels random anymore. Everything has context. This is not about judgment. It is about accuracy. Judgment clouds vision. Accuracy clears it. You are not here to criticize your past. You are here to understand it so you can move forward intelligently. Once you see clearly, emotion loses its grip. Confusion dissolves. The problem becomes smaller, not because it changed, but because you now see its shape. And shape is something you can work with. This mindset transforms frustration into focus. Instead of spinning in thought, you organize information. Instead of guessing, you gather data. Each observation brings you closer to the core of the issue. You are no longer inside the problem. You are standing over it, studying it. That positional shift is everything. From here, solutions are no longer emotional guesses. They are logical responses. This is how thinkers are built, not through constant action, but through intentional observation. The world rushes. You don't. You choose to see first. That choice will change how you solve everything. The detective mindset is the bridge between calm and clarity. Emotional control created space. Observation fills it. Now you are ready to go deeper, beyond symptoms, into causes that actually matter. In the next stage, you will learn to dig beneath the surface, to stop fixing what is visible and start addressing what is real. Seeing clearly is only the beginning. Understanding comes next. This is why patience is power. When you rush to solve, you solve the wrong thing. When you wait to understand, you solve the right thing once, instead of fighting the same battle repeatedly. Most people never slow down long enough to notice this. They live in repair mode, constantly reacting, constantly fixing symptoms. That cycle is exhausting. Clarity ends it. When you observe without panic, your nervous system relaxes, your breathing deepens, your thoughts organize. The body follows the mind. Calm perception invites intelligent action. You are training yourself to sit with uncertainty without flinching, to let questions remain unanswered while you collect more information. This patience separates amateurs from masters. The detective mindset trusts the process. It knows clarity arrives through attention, not force. You cannot bully truth into appearing. You must observe long enough for it to reveal itself. Every great solution begins with a clear picture. Without that picture, action is guesswork. With it, action is precise. You are building that picture now, layer by layer. This clarity is quiet, almost subtle, but it changes how you carry yourself. You stop rushing explanations. You stop defending assumptions. You start listening more than you speak. Observation builds authority. People trust those who see clearly. Situations stabilize around them, not because they have all the answers, but because they ask the right questions. You are becoming that person, calm, curious, grounded, the kind of person who doesn't rush to fix, but waits to understand. That identity will carry you forward. With clarity established, you are ready for the next step. Seeing is powerful, but it is not enough. Now you must learn to dig deeper, beneath what is obvious. Problems hide their truth under layers. Symptoms distract. Causes operate quietly. To solve once instead of repeatedly, you must learn to uncover what drives what you see. That journey requires discipline, honesty, and patience. You have begun cultivating all three. The noise is fading. The signal is getting stronger. You are ready for the next level. In the next chapter, you will stop guessing entirely. You will learn to trace problems back to their source. This is where surface confusion gives way to deep understanding, and everything begins to change. Stay focused now. Chapter 4. The 5-Layer Method. What you see is rarely the truth. What you see is almost never the real problem. It is only the surface, a symptom wearing a mask. And most people spend their entire lives fighting symptoms, wondering why nothing ever truly changes. They fix what's visible. They react to what's loud. They patch what's broken in front of them. And then they're shocked when the same issue returns, again and again, dressed in a different form. This cycle is exhausting. It drains motivation. It convinces people that progress is impossible. The truth is simpler and harder at the same time. They were solving the wrong problem. The 5-layer method exists to break that cycle. It forces you to slow down and dig, to move past what is obvious and confront what is driving the pattern underneath. Because real problems are rarely dramatic. They are quiet, structural, repetitive. Layer 1 is the surface. This is what hurts right now. The missed deadline, the argument, the financial stress, the burnout. This is where most people stop because it feels urgent, but urgency is not accuracy. Layer 2 asks a better question. What behavior led here? Not who is to blame, not how unfair it feels, but what actions or habits consistently produce this outcome. This layer introduces responsibility, and responsibility makes people uncomfortable. Layer 3 goes deeper. Why does that behavior exist? What belief, fear, or assumption is fueling it? This is where excuses start to dissolve, because patterns don't come from nowhere. They are built on thinking. Layer 4 challenges identity. Who have you been operating as to allow this belief to persist? This is where people resist the most, because now the problem is no longer external, it's internal, and that realization feels threatening before it feels freeing. Layer 5 is the root, the smallest, quietest truth you can influence. The leverage point, the moment where change actually becomes possible. Solve this layer, and the surface problem loses its power. Most people never reach this depth. They live at layer 1, constantly fixing leaks without addressing the pipe. They stay busy, not effective, frustrated, not empowered. Think about how many times you said, "This keeps happening," without ever asking why it keeps happening. Repetition is not bad luck. Repetition is a signal. The five-layer method trains you to respect signals instead of silencing them. Every time the same problem returns, it is pointing to something unresolved beneath the surface. Ignoring it doesn't make it disappear, it makes it louder. This is where relief begins. Not the relief of escape, but the relief of understanding. When you finally see the structure beneath the struggle, everything clicks. The chaos organizes itself. The problem shrinks. You stop fighting fires and start redesigning systems. This process requires honesty, brutal honesty. You must be willing to admit when your habits are misaligned, when your beliefs are outdated, when your identity needs upgrading. Comfort resists this. Growth demands it. Each layer you peel back builds awareness. Awareness builds choice. Choice builds power. That is the sequence. You cannot skip it. Notice the contrast. Fixing symptoms feels productive but never satisfying. Solving roots feels uncomfortable but deeply relieving. One keeps you busy, the other sets you free. This method is not about self-criticism. It is about self-accuracy. You are not here to judge yourself. You are here to understand yourself well enough to change. When you dig deeper, you stop being surprised by outcomes. You start seeing them coming. That foresight changes how you act. Prevention replaces repair. Strategy replaces stress. The five-layer method also exposes patterns across different areas of life. The same root cause often shows up in relationships, work, health, and discipline. Solve it once and multiple problems dissolve. This is why surface fixes feel endless. They treat symptoms in isolation. Root solutions create ripple effects. You may feel resistance as you go deeper. That resistance is not danger. It is ego protecting familiarity. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar growth. But safety is not the goal. Strength is. Each layer asks you to stay present a little longer, to resist the urge to rush to action, to tolerate discomfort long enough for truth to surface. That patience is rare. That patience is powerful. As you practice this method, your confidence shifts. You no longer fear complex problems. You know they have structure. You trust the process of uncovering it. Frustration fades because repetition fades. You stop solving the same problem in different forms. You solve it once properly. This is the gateway to real power, not force, not dominance. Understanding. Understanding gives you leverage over your own life. The five-layer method turns confusion into clarity. It replaces emotional guessing with deliberate inquiry. It teaches you that what feels overwhelming is often just misunderstood. By the time you reach the root, the problem no longer feels personal. It feels mechanical. And what is mechanical can be adjusted. This is how you move from exhaustion to relief, from constant fixing to intentional design, from reacting to creating. You are learning to respect depth, to value understanding over speed, to trade temporary comfort for lasting change. Most people never go this far. They stop where it feels familiar. You are choosing to go where it is effective. That choice will define you. Once you learn to see beneath the surface, you can never unsee it. Problems reveal themselves faster. Solutions become simpler, and your confidence becomes grounded, not hopeful. This is not just a method. It is a mindset of depth, a refusal to accept appearances as truth. And now that you understand how to dig, you are ready for the next skill. Seeing layers is powerful, but patterns connect those layers over time. In the next chapter, you will learn to recognize those patterns, to see how timing, triggers, and repetition expose what truly drives your life. Depth unlocked clarity. Clarity now reveals patterns. Chapter 5. Pattern recognition. Your life leaves clues. Nothing in your life is random. It only feels that way when you aren't looking closely enough. Once you slow down and observe, a different picture emerges. The same problems appear at similar moments. The same emotions surface under similar conditions. The same outcomes repeat, wearing different disguises. This is not bad luck. This is pattern. Your life leaves clues everywhere. In your calendar, in your habits, in your stress responses, in the moments you feel overwhelmed, distracted, or defeated. When you begin to recognize patterns, chaos turns into structure. What once felt unpredictable becomes understandable. Most people never notice this. They treat every problem as a one-time event, an isolated incident, something that came out of nowhere. That belief keeps them stuck, because if problems are random, there is nothing to learn, nothing to change, nothing to improve. But patterns tell a different story. Patterns reveal timing. You start noticing that certain issues show up during specific seasons. When you're tired, when routines break down, when pressure increases, when boundaries soften. These moments are not accidents. They are conditions. You also begin to notice behavioral loops, how you respond under stress, what you avoid when discomfort rises, how distraction becomes a coping mechanism, how small compromises quietly stack into major consequences. Awareness makes these loops visible. The pain is not in repetition. The pain is in repetition without learning. Every repeated problem is an unanswered question. Every recurring struggle is asking for attention. When you ignore the pattern, the problem returns louder. When you study the pattern, the problem begins to dissolve. Pattern recognition removes the emotional charge. Instead of asking why this keeps happening to you, you start asking when and under what conditions it happens. That shift replaces frustration with curiosity. Curiosity creates distance. Distance creates clarity. You begin to see how environment shapes behavior, how certain spaces drain you while others sharpen you, how certain people trigger old reactions, how certain times of day weaken discipline. These details matter. Patterns are quiet teachers. They don't shout, they repeat. Once you see them, you can no longer pretend the problem is outside your control. That realization is uncomfortable. It removes excuses, but it also returns power, because what is predictable can be prepared for. This is where strength is built. You stop judging yourself for outcomes and start studying inputs. What you eat, what you watch, who you talk to, when you rest, when you rush. These inputs shape results more than motivation ever will. Awareness without judgment is the key. Judgment shuts learning down. Awareness opens it up. You are not here to shame yourself. You are here to understand yourself. When patterns become clear, discipline becomes strategic instead of forced. You no longer rely on willpower alone. You design around reality. You anticipate weak moments instead of being surprised by them. This is the difference between reacting and preparing. Patterns also reveal consequences. When you see the same cycle repeat, you start to feel the cost. Lost time, drained energy, missed opportunities, strained relationships. Patterns make consequences undeniable. And once consequences are visible, change becomes non-negotiable. You can't unsee the trail once you notice it. You know where it leads. And knowing where it leads forces a decision. Continue as before or intervene intentionally. This chapter is about reclaiming foresight, seeing ahead instead of being dragged forward. When you recognize patterns, you stop living in surprise. You start living in anticipation. Anticipation creates leverage. You are no longer guessing. You are tracking. You are noticing. You are learning how your system operates. That knowledge is power. Most people wait for problems to explode before they act. Pattern thinkers act early. They adjust before collapse. They change course before damage spreads. This skill compounds. The more patterns you see, the faster you adapt. The faster you adapt, the fewer crises you face. Life becomes quieter, not easier, but more intentional. Pattern recognition is the bridge between understanding and accountability. Once you see the pattern, you can no longer claim ignorance. Responsibility becomes clear, and with responsibility comes choice. You are becoming someone who reads signals instead of ignoring them, someone who notices repetition and intervenes, someone who learns once instead of suffering repeatedly. That awareness sets the stage for the next step, because when patterns are clear, the cost of staying the same becomes impossible to ignore. And once the cost is clear, change stops being optional. That is where you are headed next. Chapter 6, Counting the Cost, the Price of Staying the Same. You need to look at what staying the same is actually costing you, not emotionally, not abstractly, precisely, because unresolved problems don't stay contained. They spread, quietly, patiently, until one day you wake up and realize years disappeared while you were waiting for the right moment. The most expensive decision you can make is doing nothing. Comfort feels cheap in the moment. It feels safe, familiar. You tell yourself you'll deal with it later, when things slow down, when you feel ready, when motivation arrives. But comfort always sends the bill eventually, and the bill is never small. Every unresolved problem takes time from you, not just hours, but attention. Mental bandwidth, the kind of energy that never fully rests because something unfinished is always running in the background of your mind. You may think you're relaxing, but part of you is always tense, always carrying weight. That weight accumulates. You lose time replaying the same thoughts. You lose focus switching between distractions and avoidance. You lose momentum because your energy is divided. Over weeks, it feels manageable. Over years, it becomes devastating. Then there is energy, not physical energy, but emotional fuel, the kind that allows you to show up sharp, present, and patient. Unresolved problems leak that fuel constantly. You wake up tired even after sleeping. You feel drained without doing anything difficult. That isn't laziness. That's cognitive debt. And debt compounds. Confidence erodes next. Quietly, subtly. Every time you avoid a known issue, you teach yourself something dangerous. You teach yourself that discomfort controls you, that you can't be trusted to follow through. That lesson sinks deep. Over time, you stop believing your own promises. Self-trust is built through action. Self-doubt is built through delay. Then relationships begin to feel the strain. Irritability rises, patience shortens, presence fades. Unspoken stress bleeds into conversations. You may not say what's wrong, but people feel it. Distance grows, misunderstandings multiply. Problems you avoided internally begin damaging your external world. This is the real cost. Not just what you feel, but what you lose. Lost opportunities, paths not taken, versions of yourself that never had the chance to exist because you stayed where it was comfortable. That loss doesn't scream, it whispers, and one day it turns into regret. Regret is heavier than effort ever was. This chapter is not here to shame you. Guilt paralyzes. Clarity mobilizes. You are not being punished for the past. You are being invited to see it honestly. Ask yourself what this pattern has already cost you. Not in theory, in real terms. Months, years, peace of mind, self-respect. Ask what it will cost you if nothing changes. The future cost matters more than the past. Every time you delay, the problem strengthens its position. Habits deepen, beliefs harden. Avoidance becomes identity. What once felt manageable becomes overwhelming simply because time passed without intervention. You don't need more pressure. You need more honesty. Motivation built on hype fades. Motivation built on necessity lasts. When the cost becomes undeniable, action stops feeling optional. It becomes required. That shift changes everything. You begin to realize that staying the same is not neutral. It is an active decision with consequences. Growth is uncomfortable, but stagnation is expensive. There is a moment when you finally see the full picture, when you connect the dots between patterns and outcomes, when you understand that what feels familiar is quietly costing you the life you want. That moment hurts, and then it liberates. Because once you see the cost clearly, excuses collapse. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop waiting to feel ready. Readiness is a luxury you no longer need. You don't change because someone told you to. You change because the alternative became unacceptable. This is where responsibility sharpens. You stop blaming circumstances. You stop blaming timing. You accept that the price will be paid either way, through effort now or regret later. That awareness creates urgency, calm urgency, focused urgency, the kind that doesn't panic but doesn't delay. You begin to respect your time differently. You guard your energy. You take your patterns seriously, not with fear, but with resolve. This is the turning point, the moment when clarity turns into commitment, when understanding becomes action. You are not here because you failed. You are here because you are awake enough to count the cost before it's too late. And now that the cost is visible, the next step becomes unavoidable. You can no longer pretend the surface problem is the issue. You must go deeper. You must identify what actually drives the pattern. Once the cost is clear, excuses have nowhere to hide, and that prepares you for the next phase, the moment where you stop circling the problem and start dismantling it at the root. Chapter 7, The 5 Whys, Hunting the Root Cause. Every problem has a story you tell yourself about why it exists. That story is usually wrong. It is comfortable. It protects your identity. It points outward. And as long as you accept it, the problem stays exactly where it is. The 5 Whys is the discipline that ends self-deception. Most people stop at the first explanation because it feels satisfying. I don't have time. They don't support me. It's just bad luck. That explanation removes responsibility, and removal feels good. But relief is not resolution. The first answer is almost never the truth. It is a shield. The 5 Whys forces you to keep going. You take the problem and ask why it exists. Then you take that answer and ask why again, and again, and again. Each why strips away another layer of excuse. Each why brings the problem closer to something you can actually influence. This process is uncomfortable because it removes hiding places. At first, blame lives outside you. Circumstances, other people, timing, systems. By the third or fourth why, the spotlight starts turning inward. Habits appear, decisions surface. Beliefs you've been carrying without question reveal themselves. This is where most people quit. Not because they can't understand, but because understanding demands ownership. Surface blame feels powerful. Radical responsibility is powerful. Surface blame says, this happened because of them. Radical responsibility says, this continues because of me. That shift is not self-attack. It is self-respect, because you cannot change what you don't own. Influence begins exactly where excuses end. Think of a common pattern: not saving money. Why? Spending too much. Why? Lifestyle inflation. Why? Needing comfort or status. Why? Believing you'll fix it later. Why? Avoiding short-term discomfort. There it is, a belief. Quiet, controlling, correctable. The root cause is rarely dramatic. It is ordinary. A thought you never challenged, a habit you normalized, a fear you learned to live with. That is why it's powerful, because once seen, it loses its grip. The 5 whys turns vague frustration into precise leverage. You stop fighting symptoms and start addressing drivers. You stop asking why life is hard and start asking why you keep choosing what makes it harder. That question hurts. Then it frees you. This chapter is about reclaiming influence, not over others, over yourself. When you ask why deeply enough, you discover that most problems are not created by circumstances, but sustained by patterns. And patterns exist because they serve something: comfort, avoidance, familiarity, identity. Understanding what a problem gives you is as important as understanding what it takes from you. Sometimes the problem protects you from fear. Sometimes it keeps expectations low. Sometimes it allows you to avoid responsibility. These benefits are hidden but real. Until you see them, change feels impossible. The 5 whys exposes these trades. You begin to see that the problem isn't attacking you. It's cooperating with you, supporting an old version of you that no longer fits. That realization shifts the tone from anger to strategy. You are not broken, you are patterned, and patterns can be rewritten. This process demands honesty without cruelty. You are not here to punish yourself for past decisions. You are here to understand the logic behind them so you can upgrade it. Judgment shuts down learning. Curiosity opens it. Each why should feel slightly uncomfortable. That's how you know you're getting closer. Comfort means you're still skating on the surface. As you go deeper, the problem starts to feel smaller. Not because it vanished, but because you now see the lever that moves it. Clarity replaces helplessness. This is empowerment, not hype, not affirmation, precision. You stop saying, I can't change this, and start saying, if this belief changes, everything else follows. That is a powerful position to stand in. Most people never reach the root because they confuse explanation with solution. Knowing what happened is not the same as knowing why it keeps happening. The 5 whys closes that gap. When you reach the root, something shifts internally. The problem no longer feels mysterious. Mystery creates fear. Understanding creates calm. This calm is not passive, it is focused. You know where to act, you know what matters, you know what doesn't. The 5 whys also trains discipline. It slows you down. It prevents emotional conclusions. It forces depth in a world addicted to speed. That discipline carries forward into every decision you make. You are learning to interrogate your own thinking, to question default explanations, to refuse the first story your mind offers. That skill alone will separate you from most people, because most people believe their thoughts. You examine yours. This examination reveals another critical truth. Feelings are not facts. Assumptions are not evidence. Beliefs are not reality. Until you separate these, you cannot solve anything accurately. The five whys prepares you for that separation. You are now standing at the edge of real clarity. You have traced problems back to beliefs, behaviors, decisions. You can see what actually moves the outcome. From here, the next step is unavoidable. You must learn to distinguish what is true from what is assumed, what is proven from what is felt, because solving problems requires facts, not stories. You have done the hard part. You stayed long enough to reach the root. Now it is time to refine your thinking even further, to build decisions on evidence instead of emotion. That is where accuracy becomes power, and that is where you are headed next. Chapter 8, Facts over Feelings. Thinking like a strategist. Your feelings speak loudly, but they do not speak accurately. They are persuasive, dramatic, and convincing, yet often disconnected from reality. If you let them lead, they will tell you stories that feel true and lead you in the wrong direction. Strategic thinkers learn this early. Feelings are signals, not evidence. Most people build decisions on how something feels in the moment. If it feels uncomfortable, they avoid it. If it feels exciting, they chase it. If it feels unfair, they resist it. This creates emotional certainty, which feels powerful but produces weak results. Certainty without accuracy is dangerous. Facts are quieter. They don't rush. They don't shout. They simply exist, waiting to be acknowledged. When you anchor yourself to facts, you stop arguing with reality. And the moment you stop arguing with reality, progress accelerates. Feelings ask, how do I feel about this? Facts ask, what is actually happening? That difference defines outcomes. Emotional narratives love shortcuts. They simplify complex situations into stories of blame, fear, or entitlement. These stories protect your comfort, but they sabotage your effectiveness. They make you feel justified while keeping you stuck. Facts do the opposite. They remove drama, they strip emotion from the equation and reveal structure. Structure is what strategy is built on. Thinking like a strategist means you delay judgment. You gather data, you verify assumptions. You ask what can be proven, not what feels convincing. This discipline is rare, and that rarity is why it works. Feelings change hourly. Facts remain consistent. When you rely on emotion, your decisions change with your mood. When you rely on facts, your decisions stay aligned with your goals. That consistency builds momentum. Momentum builds confidence. This chapter is about restraint. The restraint to not immediately believe the first thought that appears. The restraint to not act on the first emotion that arises. That pause creates space for verification. Ask yourself simple questions. What evidence supports this belief? What data contradicts it? What outcome does this decision consistently produce? These questions pull you out of narrative and into reality. Reality is not kind or cruel. It is neutral. And neutrality is powerful because it removes personal offense. When something isn't working, it isn't attacking you. It's giving you information. Once you operate from facts, problems lose their emotional charge. They become logistical, tactical, solvable. You stop feeling overwhelmed and start feeling engaged. This shift changes how you handle pressure. Instead of spiraling internally, you look outward. You assess. You prioritize. You sequence actions. Emotion wants resolution now. Strategy wants accuracy first. Accuracy always wins. Facts also reveal effort honestly. They show you what you actually did, not what you intended to do. They expose gaps between plans and execution. That exposure is uncomfortable, but it is clean. Clean feedback allows clean correction. Most people avoid facts because facts demand change. Feelings allow excuses. If you want growth, you must be willing to feel uncomfortable long enough to get accurate. This is where discipline matures. You stop needing motivation to act. You act because the data demands it. The numbers don't care how you feel. The results don't negotiate. Strategists respect this. When you ground yourself in facts, decision-making becomes simpler. You remove options that don't work. You focus energy where it matters. You stop guessing and start directing. Hope is not a plan. Preference is not proof. Belief is not evidence. Facts are evidence. This chapter is not asking you to ignore emotion. It is asking you to put emotion in its place. Feel first if you must, then think, then verify, then act. This order changes everything. You begin to trust yourself more, not because you feel confident, but because your decisions are consistent. You know why you choose what you choose. You can explain it. You can defend it. You can repeat it. That is strategic confidence. Once your thinking is grounded, execution becomes possible. Structure replaces guesswork. Plans replace reactions. Action replaces avoidance. You are no longer hoping things work out. You are designing outcomes. This grounding prepares you for the next phase. Strategy without execution is incomplete. Facts give you clarity. Clarity demands action. You now have the foundation to move deliberately, to break complexity into steps, to act with precision instead of impulse. Feeling guided you here. Facts will take you forward. Now it is time to build. Chapter 9. From Insight to Action, Breaking Complexity into Control. Clarity feels powerful, but clarity alone does nothing. Insight without action is just a more sophisticated form of avoidance. You can understand everything and still stay stuck. That is the trap. This chapter exists to break it. Knowing is not moving. Thinking is not building. Action is where control is proven. Most problems feel overwhelming because they arrive as a single, massive weight. Too many variables, too many unknowns, too much at once. The mind sees the whole and freezes. Paralysis follows, not because you are incapable, but because you are trying to swallow complexity in one bite. Control begins when you stop doing that. Complexity is not solved all at once. It is reduced, separated, sequenced. When you break a problem down into steps small enough to execute, chaos turns into order. Fear turns into movement. Movement turns into momentum. Momentum is everything. The difference between people who stay stuck and people who progress is not courage. It is structure. One waits for confidence before acting. The other acts until confidence appears. Confidence is a byproduct of forward motion, not a prerequisite. This is where most people hesitate. They want certainty before they move. But certainty only arrives after movement. Action reveals information that thinking never can. You do not need the full plan. You need the first step. When a problem feels too big, that is a signal you are looking at it incorrectly. Instead of asking, how do I solve this? Ask, what is the next executable action? Not the perfect action, not the most impressive one, the next one. Small steps feel unimpressive to the ego. That is why they work. Each step reduces cognitive load. Each step creates feedback. Each step proves something important to you, that you move when things are unclear, that you act when things are uncomfortable, that you don't wait for perfect conditions. This is how identity changes. Every completed step sends a message to your nervous system. I am someone who follows through. That message compounds. Over time, it becomes belief. Belief becomes behavior. Behavior becomes reputation, first with yourself, then with the world. Structure creates calm. When you know what comes next, anxiety loses its grip. You are no longer facing an undefined future. You are executing a defined process. This is how professionals operate. They don't feel overwhelmed because they don't hold everything in their head at once. They externalize complexity, lists, systems, schedules. Sequence replaces stress. Chaos lives in abstraction. Control lives in specificity. Break the problem down until each piece feels almost too easy. That is not weakness. That is intelligence. Easy steps remove friction. Friction is the enemy of consistency. Most people fail not because they choose the wrong action, but because they choose actions that are too large to repeat. Sustainability matters more than intensity. Action also exposes reality. What you thought would work might not. That is not failure. That is data. You adjust, you refine, you continue. This feedback loop is how mastery is built. You are no longer guessing, you are testing. This chapter is about shifting from outcome obsession to process commitment. Outcomes are noisy, processes are stable. When you commit to the process, outcomes take care of themselves. The calm of structure replaces the chaos of possibility. As you execute, something subtle changes. The problem stops feeling like a threat. It becomes a project. Projects can be managed, threats cannot. That reframing changes how your body responds. Less tension, more focus, clearer thinking. This is why action reduces anxiety. Anxiety thrives on inaction. Every time you move, even imperfectly, you reclaim control. You stop negotiating with fear. You stop waiting for permission. You prove to yourself that progress is possible now, not someday. Do not underestimate this shift. It is foundational. Many people solve problems once and return to old habits. That is not mastery. Mastery is consistency. Consistency is built through systems, not bursts of effort. You are learning to build systems. Systems remove decision fatigue. They tell you what to do even when motivation is low. They protect progress during emotional dips. They make discipline repeatable. This is the difference between amateurs and professionals. Amateurs rely on mood. Professionals rely on structure. Each small step you take trains you for larger ones. Capacity expands gradually. What once felt heavy becomes normal. What once felt impossible becomes routine. That is how growth actually happens. Quietly, repeatedly, without drama. You stop measuring yourself by how inspired you feel and start measuring yourself by how consistently you execute. That metric never lies. This chapter is not about rushing. It is about moving deliberately. Speed comes later. Precision comes first. As steps accumulate, momentum builds. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence allows you to handle more complexity without freezing. You don't avoid big problems anymore. You know how to break them down. This skill changes everything: careers, relationships, health, discipline. Once you know how to move forward under uncertainty, life stops feeling fragile. You become resilient by design. Action clarifies priorities. When you are moving, you quickly see what matters and what doesn't. Noise fades, focus sharpens, energy concentrates. This is why thinking alone is dangerous. It feels productive without producing anything. Action forces reality to respond. You are becoming someone who responds with movement instead of rumination, with structure instead of stress, with execution instead of excuses. That identity will carry you forward. As you practice this, problem solving stops being an event and becomes a habit. You no longer wait for crises to act. You maintain systems that prevent them. This is the transition from fixing problems to mastering them. One step, then another, then another. That is how control is built. Not all at once, but always forward. You are no longer standing still with clarity. You are moving with intention. And movement, sustained over time, is how mastery is earned. This chapter closes the gap between understanding and doing. The next chapter will take this further, from execution to refinement, from action to skill. Because once you know how to move, the next question becomes how to get better at moving. That is where true mastery begins. Chapter 10. Building the problem-solving muscle. Problem solving is not something you either have or don't have. It is not talent. It is not intelligence. It is not luck. It is a muscle, and like any muscle, it grows only when you use it. Most people treat problems like verdicts. If they struggle, they assume it means they're bad at life. If they fail, they assume it means they're not cut out for responsibility. That belief keeps them weak, because muscles don't grow by avoiding weight. They grow by meeting resistance again and again. Failure is not evidence of incapacity. Failure is evidence of training. Every time you face a problem and work through it, even imperfectly, something inside you changes. Your tolerance for pressure increases. Your thinking sharpens. Your emotional response stabilizes. You don't panic as quickly. You don't spiral as deeply. That is the muscle strengthening. Iteration is where strength is built. Most people quit after the first attempt doesn't work. They treat one failure as a final answer. But mastery never arrives on the first try. It arrives through repetition, correction, and persistence. Each attempt teaches you what doesn't work, and that knowledge is not wasted. It compounds. This is how confidence becomes real. Imagine confidence is loud. Earned confidence is quiet. It comes from knowing you've been here before, that you've handled pressure, that you've adapted, that no matter how it turns out, you know how to respond. Problem-solving confidence is not optimism. It is familiarity. You stop fearing challenges because you've survived enough of them. You stop doubting yourself because evidence replaces hope. You know how you behave under stress because you've trained there. This chapter is about shifting focus, away from winning every time, toward becoming someone who can handle anything. Outcomes fluctuate. Identity endures. When you measure yourself only by results, you ride an emotional roller coaster. Success inflates you. Failure crushes you. But when you measure yourself by process, by effort, by learning, stability replaces volatility. Each problem you solve, no matter how small, upgrades your capacity. What once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. What once demanded all your focus becomes routine. That is growth in its purest form. Think about how skills develop. No one lifts heavy weight on day one. No one runs long distance without conditioning. No one thinks clearly under pressure without practice. Problem solving is no different. You must train under load. That means allowing yourself to struggle without self-attack. It means staying present when things don't work. It means resisting the urge to quit emotionally the moment something becomes difficult. This is where most people sabotage themselves. They make failure mean something about who they are, but failure only means something about what they tried. Separate the two. When you detach identity from outcome, you gain freedom to experiment, to test, to adjust, to iterate. That freedom accelerates growth faster than perfection ever could. You are not here to avoid mistakes. You are here to outgrow them. Each iteration builds resilience. You recover faster. You adapt quicker. You stop catastrophizing. You learn to trust the process because you've seen it work. Over time, something subtle happens. You become calm in situations that used to overwhelm you. Not because you don't care, but because you're capable. Capability breeds composure. This is what strong people feel like on the inside. Not fearless, familiar with fear, not unshaken, trained to recover quickly. Problem solving becomes part of who you are. You start approaching challenges differently. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" you ask, "What will I learn?" Instead of avoiding pressure, you see it as training. Instead of needing reassurance, you rely on evidence. This identity shift matters more than any single solution, because life will keep changing. New problems will appear, old ones will evolve. The only constant advantage is the ability to think, adapt, and respond. That is the muscle you are building. You are becoming someone who doesn't need perfect conditions to function, someone who doesn't collapse when plans break, someone who can stay steady while others react emotionally. That steadiness is not personality, it is practice. Every repetition reinforces it. Every challenge strengthens it. Every recovery deepens it. This is why you don't rush mastery. You respect the process. You understand that strength built slowly lasts longer than strength built quickly. You stop asking for easier problems. You start becoming stronger. This chapter is about patience with yourself, about allowing growth to be gradual, about trusting that consistency beats intensity every time. The goal is not to eliminate struggle. The goal is to become someone who handles struggle well. When you reach that point, fear changes shape. It no longer stops you. It signals importance. It sharpens focus. It tells you you're growing. That is a powerful place to stand. As your problem-solving muscle strengthens, you stop seeing challenges as interruptions. You see them as part of the path. Necessary, useful, expected. This is when confidence stops depending on outcomes. You trust yourself regardless of results, because you know how you'll respond. That trust changes how you walk into rooms, how you speak under pressure, how you decide when things are uncertain. You are not hoping anymore. You are prepared. This preparation sets the stage for the next evolution. Once problem-solving becomes part of your identity, pressure itself takes on new meaning. You begin to realize that the weight you carry is not a burden. It is proof that you're ready for more. That realization changes how you see responsibility, and that is where the next chapter begins. Chapter 11. Pressure as Privilege, Upgrading Your Identity. Pressure is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a signal that something is expanding. Only people who are growing feel pressure, because pressure appears when responsibility increases. Comfort never creates it. Stagnation never demands it. Pressure shows up when you are being asked to become more than you were before. Weakness avoids pressure. Strength interprets it. Most people run from weight the moment they feel it. They see pressure as proof they are overwhelmed, behind, or incapable. So they retreat. They downsize their goals. They lower expectations. They trade potential for relief. That choice feels good in the short term, but it quietly shrinks identity. Strong people make a different move. They don't ask how to escape pressure. They ask what pressure is preparing them for. They understand that responsibility is not given randomly. It is assigned to those who have developed the capacity to carry it. Pressure is evidence of trust. Life does not load weight onto weak structures. It tests, then increases the load. If pressure has entered your life, it is because something in you has already grown. You are being invited to upgrade how you see yourself. This chapter is about that upgrade. You are not the person you were when things were easier. You have trained, you have adapted, you have built skills most people never commit to building. Pressure is not here to crush you. It is here to confirm that you are ready for more. But readiness demands identity alignment. If you still see yourself as someone who needs comfort, pressure will feel unbearable. If you see yourself as someone who handles responsibility, pressure becomes meaningful. The same weight feels different depending on who you believe you are. Identity determines interpretation. Strong people seek responsibility because responsibility forces growth. Weak people seek comfort because comfort protects the familiar. One expands life, the other preserves limitation. This does not mean chasing stress blindly. It means respecting challenge as a signal. When something stretches you, it is asking you to expand your self-image. You stop saying, "This is too much for me," and start saying, "This is shaping me." That shift changes everything. Pressure exposes gaps. Gaps show where strength needs to be built. Without pressure, you never see them. Without seeing them, you never grow. Pressure accelerates evolution. This is why avoidance is dangerous. Avoidance delays growth. It keeps identity outdated while life continues to demand more. Eventually, the gap becomes painful. Welcoming pressure closes that gap intentionally. You begin to stand taller under responsibility. You stop apologizing for weight. You stop minimizing your capacity. You accept that you are becoming someone who carries more than before. That acceptance builds pride, quiet pride, earned pride. When you see pressure as privilege, you stop resenting challenge. You respect it. You understand that not everyone gets invited to play at higher levels. Responsibility is selective. If pressure is present, it chose you. This realization transforms how you approach problems. Instead of asking how to make life easier, you ask how to become stronger. Instead of shrinking goals, you expand capability. That mindset separates leaders from followers. Leaders don't wait for pressure to disappear. They rise to meet it. They adapt systems. They refine skills. They become larger internally so the weight feels lighter. This chapter is an invitation to upgrade your identity deliberately, to stop seeing yourself as someone under attack and start seeing yourself as someone in training. Training is hard by design. Pressure also clarifies purpose. When responsibility increases, you are forced to decide why you are doing what you're doing. Surface motivations collapse. Only meaningful reasons remain. This is where personal growth turns into something bigger. You realize that your ability to handle pressure does not only benefit you, it stabilizes others. It creates reliability. It allows people to lean on you. That matters. A strong person becomes a pillar. When you upgrade your identity, you don't just gain resilience, you gain usefulness. You become someone others trust under pressure, someone who doesn't disappear when things get difficult. That role carries meaning. You stop measuring success only by comfort and start measuring it by contribution. How much weight you can carry without breaking. How much chaos you can organize. how much responsibility you can absorb and still move forward. This is not about ego, it is about service. Pressure refines you so you can show up when it matters. For family, for work, for community, for moments that require strength. When you embrace pressure, you stop seeing problems as interruptions and start seeing them as proof of progress. Proof that you are no longer operating at beginner levels. You have earned this. The path forward is not lighter, it is heavier. And you are becoming the kind of person who can carry it. That realization creates calm confidence, not arrogance, not bravado, quiet certainty. You stop wishing for easier days. You prepare for bigger ones. This is the upgrade, from seeking relief to seeking responsibility, from avoiding pressure to welcoming it, from shrinking under weight to standing taller because of it. You are not overwhelmed. You are being expanded. And as you accept this identity, a deeper question begins to surface. Why does this matter? Why become strong? Why carry more? The answer reaches beyond personal success. That is where purpose begins to speak. Chapter 12, Becoming the Solution, Impact Beyond Yourself. At first, you learn to solve problems to survive, to protect yourself, to reduce stress, to regain control. That was necessary, but now the frame must expand, because real strength does not stop at self-preservation. It moves outward. Problem solving is not just a personal skill, it is a public service. When you become clear, others feel it. When you stay calm, chaos around you settles. When you respond instead of react, situations stabilize. This is impact most people underestimate. Strength is contagious. So is confusion. And the strongest influence you will ever have is how you show up under pressure. Most people think leadership means authority, volume, control, dominance. That is insecurity pretending to be power. Real leadership is reliability, the ability to remain steady when things are uncertain, the ability to think clearly when others are overwhelmed, the ability to move forward when others freeze. Your problem-solving skill becomes a form of service the moment it stops being about you alone. Families are shaped by who stays calm during conflict. Teams are shaped by who thinks clearly during stress. Communities are shaped by who doesn't disappear when pressure rises. When you solve problems effectively, you become someone others can depend on. Dependability is rare. That is why it matters. You don't need a title to lead. You don't need permission to stabilize a situation. You lead every time you refuse to panic. Every time you organize instead of complain. Every time you bring clarity where others bring noise. This is how trust is built. People trust those who don't collapse under weight, those who don't make things worse emotionally, those who can absorb tension and still act intelligently. That trust multiplies your influence far beyond words. Notice the shift. Life stops being about avoiding discomfort and starts being about carrying responsibility well. You no longer ask how to protect your peace at all costs. You ask how to become strong enough to protect others when needed. That is maturity. Problem solving at this level becomes contribution. Your clarity saves time. Your composure saves energy. Your structure prevents damage. These effects ripple outward quietly but powerfully. This is not about self-sacrifice. It is about self-expansion. When you grow your capacity, you don't lose yourself. You become more useful, more effective, more meaningful, and meaning sustains effort longer than comfort ever could. Avoidance isolates. Contribution connects. You begin to see problems differently again, not as inconveniences, but as moments that require someone to step up, someone to bring order, someone to think. Sometimes that someone is you. This realization changes your motivation. You no longer improve just to feel better. You improve to be reliable, to be counted on, to matter in moments that matter. That purpose deepens discipline. When you know others are affected by how you show up, excuses lose their appeal. You don't disappear when it's hard. You don't hand responsibility back to chaos. You stay present. Becoming the solution does not mean fixing everything. It means refusing to add to the problem. It means being steady when others are emotional, clear when others are confused, constructive when others are reactive. This is strength with humility. As your lens widens, your life stops shrinking around fear. You stop living defensively. You live directionally toward growth, toward usefulness, toward impact. This is where transformation becomes complete, not because problems disappear, but because your relationship to them has fundamentally changed. You no longer avoid. You engage. You organize. You lead. And now, as this journey nears its close, one final integration remains. Not just solving problems, not just carrying pressure, but living as someone who has fully mastered themselves. That is where everything converges. Chapter 13, A Life of Transformation. Problems never end. Mastery does. Problems will never stop coming. If that truth still frustrates you, it means part of you is still waiting for relief instead of readiness. A problem-free life was never the reward. Mastery was. Most people chase peace by trying to remove difficulty. They want silence without strength, ease without competence. They believe that if they could just eliminate enough problems, they would finally feel calm. But avoidance never creates peace. It creates fragility. Real peace comes from knowing you can handle what arrives. This is the final shift. The understanding that life is not something to be stabilized permanently, but something to be engaged with skillfully. Problems do not mean you are failing. They mean you are alive, progressing, and being asked to adapt again. Mastery is not the absence of challenge, it is the presence of capacity. When you accept this, bitterness dissolves. You stop resenting life for being difficult. Difficulty becomes expected, normal, even useful. The emotional charge fades because surprise fades. You are no longer asking when it gets easier. You are asking how you refine further. That question changes everything. A resilient mind does not burn out because it is not fighting reality. It works with it. It does not resist pressure emotionally. It distributes it intelligently. Systems replace strain. Skill replaces force. Burnout happens when effort has no meaning, when struggle feels endless and pointless. But when struggle is understood as refinement, energy returns. You see progress even in difficulty. Life becomes a craft. Each problem becomes a material to work with. Each setback becomes feedback. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to sharpen judgment, discipline, and composure. You are no longer stuck in cycles. You are evolving through them. This is what maturity feels like internally. Calm without complacency, acceptance without surrender, strength without aggression. You stop needing life to validate you. You validate yourself through consistency, through showing up, through handling what needs to be handled. This is the peace of competence. It is quieter than happiness, deeper than motivation, more stable than confidence built on success. It comes from knowing that no matter what changes externally, you remain capable internally. That knowledge frees you. You no longer fear the future because you trust your ability to respond to it. You no longer cling to comfort because you know you can rebuild stability anywhere. You no longer resent responsibility because you have grown into it. Life becomes a continuous process of refinement, not a battle to be won once. You adjust, you learn, you adapt, again and again. This acceptance does not make you passive, it makes you precise. You don't rush, you don't panic, you don't dramatize. You act with intention, you conserve energy, you choose wisely. Problems still appear, but they arrive differently now. They don't knock you off center. They don't hijack your emotions. They meet someone prepared, you. This chapter is about closure without finality, resolution without illusion. You are not reaching an endpoint. You are stepping into a way of being, a way where growth never stops, but exhaustion does, where challenges continue, but overwhelm fades, where pressure remains, but panic disappears. That is mastery. You have learned how to think under stress, how to slow down, how to see clearly, how to dig deep, how to act deliberately, how to build capacity over time. Those skills compound into an identity. You are no longer someone life happens to. You are someone who engages life deliberately. This identity carries forward into everything: work, relationships, health, leadership. You don't look for escape, you look for alignment. You don't avoid discomfort, you manage it intelligently. The strongest people are not those with the easiest lives. They are those who have learned how to live fully inside difficulty without being consumed by it. That is who you are becoming. As this chapter closes, you are standing in a different place than when you began. Not because your problems disappeared, but because your relationship to them transformed. You don't need guarantees anymore. You don't need certainty. You have something better. You have self-mastery, and self-mastery is the only victory that cannot be taken from you. What remains now is not another lesson, but a culmination, a final integration of everything you've built, a reminder of who you are and how you move forward from here. The journey ends, but the way of being continues. And in the final chapter, that truth becomes unshakable. Closing chapter, The Unshakable Mind, From Reaction to Creation. You are not the person you were when this journey began. Back then, life happened to you. Problems arrived without warning, and you reacted on instinct, emotion, and habit. You felt rushed, pressured, and constantly behind. That version of you believed peace would come when things stopped going wrong. Now you know better. Peace does not come from the absence of problems. It comes from the presence of mastery. And mastery is not loud. It does not announce itself. It shows up quietly in how you think, how you pause, and how you choose your response when pressure appears. This is the unshakable mind. An unshakable mind does not mean nothing affects you. It means nothing controls you. Emotions still rise, but they no longer dictate your actions. Challenges still appear, but they no longer intimidate you. Problems no longer feel like threats. They feel like signals, like invitations to apply what you have built. You are no longer reactive, you are responsive. Reaction is fast and sloppy. Response is calm and deliberate. Reaction wastes energy. Response directs it. This is the difference between surviving life and shaping it. You have learned how to slow the moment down, how to create space between stimulus and action. In that space, you now stand grounded. You think clearly. You decide intentionally. You move forward without panic. That ability changes everything. Consistency has replaced chaos. You no longer need emotional highs to function. You no longer wait to feel ready. You act because it is aligned, not because it is exciting. That discipline compounds quietly day after day. This is what real strength looks like. The world celebrates hype, loud motivation, temporary intensity, but you have learned something deeper. Hype fades, systems last, motivation fluctuates, identity endures. You don't rise and fall with your emotions anymore. You operate from principle, from structure, from clarity. That is why you are unshakable. Problems now activate you instead of paralyzing you. When something breaks, you don't collapse. You assess, you break it down, you move step by step. That process is familiar. It feels like home. This is not arrogance. It is earned confidence. You trust yourself because you have evidence. You have faced uncertainty and stayed composed. You have carried responsibility and grown stronger under it. You have solved problems without needing perfect conditions. That trust is your foundation. An unshakable mind is built through repetition, not revelation. You didn't change overnight. You trained, you practiced, you failed and adjusted. You stayed when it was uncomfortable. You chose clarity over comfort again and again. That is why this change lasts. You are no longer searching for escape. You are building capacity. You are no longer asking for life to be easier. You are preparing yourself to be stronger. This is the shift from reaction to creation. Creation begins when you stop being pushed by circumstances and start designing your response. You create order where there was chaos. You create progress where there was stagnation. You create meaning where there was frustration. Your mind is no longer a battlefield. It is a workshop. In that workshop, you refine yourself daily. You sharpen judgment. You strengthen discipline. You simplify what matters and release what doesn't. This is how mastery expresses itself. Quietly, reliably, consistently. You no longer measure success by moments of relief. You measure it by how well you handle weight, by how calmly you navigate uncertainty, by how steadily you move forward regardless of conditions. This is adult strength, mature strength. The world will continue to test you. That will not change. What has changed is who receives the test, not someone hoping to survive, someone prepared to respond. You don't fear problems anymore because you know how to approach them. You don't rush decisions because you respect process. You don't doubt yourself because your confidence is built on experience, not fantasy. This is why mastery is unstoppable. It does not rely on circumstances. It does not depend on mood. It cannot be taken from you by setbacks or failure. It is internal, earned, rebuilt every day through discipline. As this audiobook ends, the work does not. It becomes simpler, clearer, quieter. You continue applying what you know. You continue refining how you think. You continue strengthening the habits that keep you grounded. You don't need constant reminders. You have become the reminder. When pressure arrives, you remember who you are. When chaos appears, you return to structure. When emotion rises, you create space. When uncertainty appears, you move deliberately. This is your way now. You are not waiting for permission. You are not chasing motivation. You are not avoiding difficulty. You are meeting life with clarity and strength. That is the unshakable mind. Quiet, disciplined, reliable. And once built, it carries you forward through anything. You are ready. Stay consistent. Stay grounded. Stay deliberate. Mastery is not a moment. It is how you live. And you are living it now. From this point forward, you no longer need dramatic turning points to feel powerful. Power lives in repetition. In the ordinary days where you choose structure over impulse, in the quiet moments where you honor your standards without applause. That is where real progress is built. You will notice that others still panic, still rush, still react emotionally. That no longer pulls you in. You observe without judgment. You move without noise. You let results speak. This calm will unsettle some people, not because you are wrong, but because you are centered. Stability stands out in a reactive world. Let it. Remember this above all else. You do not need to win every moment to win your life. You need to show up consistently with clarity and discipline. That is enough. That always compounds. There will be days when effort feels heavy, days when progress seems slow. On those days, you return to process. You trust what you've built. You keep moving, one deliberate step at a time. That is how mastery survives storms. You are no longer chasing a version of yourself. You are becoming one through action, through restraint, through choice. And as long as you continue choosing well, nothing external can undo what you've built internally. This is not the end. It is the standard. Carry it forward. Apply it daily. Let your life reflect the quiet strength of an unshakable mind. No matter where you go, return to clarity, structure, and calm execution, because those qualities will guide your decisions, protect your energy, and ensure that whatever you face next becomes another opportunity to practice mastery with confidence and purpose.